Alright, you guys, so today I'm going to be doing another sort of historical video, and this is really, a video that's going to address something that I don't feel is very well known within the Rockafire community, and make clear the difference between two shows that Creative Engineering made prior to the Rockafire explosion. These shows are the Bear Country Jubilee and the Hard Luck Bears, which are two entirely different shows, and although they have some similarities, they are very unique. I frequently see these shows referred to as though they are the same, so I sort of wanted to address this. So let's start out with the first show, which is the Bear Country Jubilee, and this was a show that was created after the Santa Claus Review, and in my opinion is maybe even a greater step than the Santa Claus Review was in terms of moving towards the Rockafire explosion. The show was first conceived of and built in 1978, and here you can see Dave Thomas's artwork. It was sold to two amusement parks, Maury's Pier in Wildwood, New Jersey, as well as Americana Amusement Park in Middletown, Ohio. The first thing I would note is that the characters on both the Hard Luck Bears as well as the Bear Country Jubilee shows are entirely different, and with that comes an entirely different show tape. The names of the characters in the Bear Country Jubilee had been widely forgotten, but the characters are Pierre the Bear, Waldo. On center stage you have Fingers Dan, Chet Fatikins, Boom Boom Bosco, Buddy Crash, and I'm afraid I don't know the name of the female bear. There were also some stage props like a raccoon and a little bear. Americana Amusement Park had Mortimer and Buford, but the Maury's Pier show never received this, and when Creative Engineering bought it back, they added those characters to the show. So the center stage of the show is called the Four Season Bears. So the entire show is the Bear Country Jubilee, and then the four main characters are the Four Season Bears. And the environment sort of theme of the show is foresty and country. That's the theme of the music. The show tape itself, the original show tape for the show is very slow, as it had no involvement from Clutch, and was made with help from John Cederberg. John Cederberg also did the Santa Claus Review show tape, and he was, I think, all the characters on the show. In the Bear Country Jubilee, Aaron voiced Chet, which is the center character. Mechanically, these characters are pretty similar to the Wolfpack 5 in the sense that they are actually hollow fiberglass shells with mechanisms bolted to the fiberglass, as opposed to having an actual central independent frame that the fiberglass would bolt to. The exact movement count is unknown, but the characters have very few movements, with some maybe only having 7 or 8. And also some of the movements like body leans were linked together because of the primitive tone control system of the time. And, as far as electronics go, the Bear Country Jubilee, as I just said, ran on a tone-based control system, which, was typical of Creative Engineering shows at the time, like the Wolfpack 5, like the Confederate Critter show. It's unknown what happened to the Americana show, but the Maury's Pier show is now with Aaron and was fully restored when Creative Engineering got it back in 1984 or 85. The Hard Luck Bears could be seen as an advancement of the Bear Country Jubilee, which is true in some ways, but the reality is that it's an entirely different show. This show was created in 1979 and brought to the IAAPA. As many of you guys know, this is really what caught the attention of Bob Brock. What's interesting is the show tape refers to the show as the Country Bear Jubilee.
Well, welcome folks to the Country Bear Jubilee.
From my understanding, this is the name of the full show, with the Hard Luck Bears being the center stage. Just like with the Bear Country Jubilee, their center stage is the Four Season Bears. I just call the entire show the Hard Luck Bears because it makes it much easier to differentiate. Instead of it being the Bear Country Jubilee and the Country Bear Jubilee, you have the Bear Country Jubilee and the Hard Luck Bears. So this show was really more successful in the sense that more customers purchased it than the Bear Country Jubilee. The characters are Pete and Repeat Thornsberry, and then the center stage is Billy Bill, Billy Wilbur, Billy Boy, and Billy Bob, and then you have Mama Grandbags and Goonie Bird. To my knowledge, 6 shows were sold over what's a pretty long period. I think most expect that the shows were sold and installed in 1980 prior to the Rockafire, but the reality is that most were actually installed around 1981 or later. The show Creative Engineering brought to the IAAPA was sold to Carowinds in 1980, where it was retrofitted into the Honey Bear Bunch. A few other shows that were sold in 1980 were the Knoebel show as well as the Blackpool Pleasure Beach show. In 1981, a show was sold to Play Center Brazil, In 1982, a show was sold to Callaway Park, and finally in 1983, the final show was sold to Mundo Mágico in Chile. One elusive show that I don't think anyone knows about is that there was a show installed in a place called Family Show Street, USA, also called just Show Street, USA, and this was in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I'll mention a little bit more about this. Now, what's interesting about the Hard Luck Bears is the mechanical inconsistency with how they were built. The first show that was brought to the IAAPA in 1979 was somewhat similar to the Wolfpack 5, but had some distinct differences that led to how the Rockafire would later be built. The Wolfpack 5 really has no mechanical pieces that are separate from the fiberglass frame. This makes maintenance very difficult, as you have to sort of just reach inside, and it's pretty much impossible to disassemble and make repairs. The first Hard Luck Bears show, as featured here, still had this quality, but they started to deviate from the Wolfpack 5. Here you can see Billy Bill, and you can see that the head frame is independent from any fiberglass. A thin fiberglass skull would have gone over this, but it doesn't actually make up the main structure. But the body is clearly very similar to the Wolfpack 5 Fats. So these were still definitely primitive. And here's a picture of Goonie Bird. This is the first Hard Luck Bears Goonie Bird. And as you can see, his eyes are huge, not a standard size. As well as you can see sort of the jaw mechanism, how it's very short. This is clearly not something that would be compatible with the Rockafire character. This was prior to standardization. So this first Hard Luck Bear show was very primitive, but did take some leaps towards advancement. And what's unique about the Hard Luck Bears is that over their lifespan they changed radically. It was the first show to change to a fully independent aluminum frame, and that's what I'm about to discuss. After this first Hard Luck Bears show, they began to manufacture the characters almost in the same state that the Rockafire characters were produced. And this was done, in my opinion, because they wanted to standardize the manufacturing of the characters, and it would be inconvenient to go back to an old way of producing them and machine entirely new pieces. They wanted to have everything a standard size. You'd have all the bars for the head frames be the same, you would have the eye sizes be the same, and this just makes it far easier to produce these characters while maintaining how good they look and how consistent they are. So one of these shows that preceded the first Hard Luck Bears show was the Knoebel show, and you can see right here Billy Wilbur, unfortunately in a pretty sad state, but we can see quite a bit about his mechanism. This is an entirely different mechanism than the first Hard Luck Bears show. He has a central aluminum frame. He isn't supported by any fiberglass. Fiberglass just goes on the exterior. However, there's certainly a lot of differences from the Rockafire. We aren't quite there yet, in terms of advancement. You can see that the body lean cylinder is actually mounted in the back. I think pretty much every Hard Luck Bears show was basically produced differently because CEI continued to advance. So this picture right here was taken in 1981. This is another Billy Wilbur, and I'm pretty sure that this is Callaway Park's Billy Wilbur. Just based on how he's built. You can see it's basically the same, but they're using a Fabco cylinder for the head up as opposed to a cylinders and valve cylinder that you could see in the Knoebels. And then the body lean is mounted in the front, far closer to the Rockafire. And this is a solid aluminum frame as opposed to a hollow aluminum frame. This is basically a modified Rockafire character. Not even really that. It is a Hard Luck Bears character that has been produced with Rockafire parts. Due to the fact that the first Hard Luck Bears show did not have standard eye distances or standard eye sizes, when they went to make these later shows that would be compatible with Rockafire parts, they had to resculpt all the masks so they would accommodate these new frames and be interchangeable with the Rockafire. So as you can see from the sculpture photo right here, these are the later Hard Luck Bears mask versions, and these were actually made basically in the same time period that the Rockafire was being developed. So you can also see this is the first Fats sculpture. So certain characters in the Hard Luck Bears didn't need to change, like Pete, Repeat, and Mama Grandbags, but the other characters did need to be changed. So as you can see here, the massive eyes on Billy Wilbur and how they're pretty far apart. Same with Billy Bob. Billy Boy actually utilized Dingo's mask initially, and the original Goonie Bird from the first show had a longer beak, and when he was resculpted, he had a shorter beak. I can't really find any good pictures of Goonie Bird, so here's the best one I can find. But basically, Billy Bill, Billy Wilbur, Billy Boy, Billy Bob, as well as Goonie Bird all had 2 mask versions. Now, in terms of the existence of these masks, the first Wilbur mold does exist. But, you know, as you know from what I've just told you, that was only used on one show. The second version that is, you know, was also Billy Bob in the Rockafire Explosion's first mask. That mold, I'm afraid, no longer exists. The original Goonie Bird doesn't exist either, the one with the long beak. So in terms of the way that the shows ran, a few Hard Luck Bear shows ran on tones like Carowinds and Knobles, but shows like Callaway Park, which were installed in 1982, had a modified gray box control system. And then in terms of the existence of the shows, Carowinds show ran from 1980 until the 1990s. An employee told me that the show was dismantled, but I've heard that so many times, and it turned out to be untrue that I really have no idea what actually happened to the show. Blackpool Pleasure Beach show was sent to Frontierland and ran until about 2000. Its state is unknown, but I would say it's likely that show was destroyed. However, they also had a gorilla similar to Maury's Pier, and that gorilla was active in a bar up until the early 2000s. Play Center's show ran into the 90s but was destroyed in a flood. Callaway Park show ran until 2001 and was reportedly sold to another park, but that's not totally clear. Mundo Mágico's show was moved to another park in Chile and actually still runs, if you can call it that. They've been retrofitted into sort of strange cartoon robots. And as for Family Show Street USA, again, I have virtually no information on this other than I know that they did receive the show, and there's a little bit of documentation. I have a newspaper clipping showing that they sold, and you can see in that auction there they say, you know, we have, you know, Bear Show for sale. But it appears that show ran from 1981 to 83, and I have no idea what happened after that. It might have been sold, you know, something else might have happened to it. But finally, Knobel's show ran until 1995, and luckily they still have their show in storage. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the only show that it's really apparent still exists, along with the Chile show. So finally, what sort of caused people to believe that these shows are the same? Well, I believe, and well, pretty much know, that at one time they did become the same show. There's quite a bit of evidence for this. Take, for example, the gorilla with Mama Grandbags and the piano that Creative Engineering sold to Maury's Pier. The entire premise of those characters are based on the Hard Luck Bears show tape. You know, with the whole joke that, you know, Mama Grandbags is going out with a shotgun to chase after this gorilla. So why would they send that into a Bear Country Jubilee show? Well, at some point, Creative Engineering sent them an updated show tape that is the Hard Luck Bears show tape, with Goonie Bird cut out and Mortimer and Buford added. And you can hear this on YouTube for proof that at one time the Bear Country Jubilee show did run on the Hard Luck Bears show tape. And I don't know if this happened at Americana as well, but definitely whenever Creative Engineering received the show back from Maury's Pier, that show ran on a Hard Luck Bears show tape. And they also performed some upgrades to the show when they bought it, like changing it to a modified gray box control system. And I think this is where a lot of the confusion stems from, but you know, another element is the fact that they are both bear shows with a very similar theme. But it would be really helpful if you guys would let me know in the comments if this sort of video interests you. A lot of this stuff is very complex. I've sort of, over the, I would say, you know, 5 years, I've sort of learned a lot about the Hard Luck Bears. I used to be very interested in them. And, you know, I sort of wanted to compile this to show that, you know, Bear Country Jubilee and the Hard Luck Bears are different shows. So if you guys enjoyed this, please let me know. And if you like these videos, also let me know, because I enjoy producing the historical videos. But, you know, obviously I want to see, you know, what do other people enjoy them as well.